Hey guys, welcome back to the BuzWeaver channel. And in our top stories today from the Washington Post, many of you may have heard of this on Monday, Biden approves Ukraine's use of long-range U.S. weapons inside Russia, reversing policy. The Biden administration will allow Kyiv limited use of ATACMS to strike enemy positions in Russia, according to senior U.S. officials. Now, a lot of this is going to depend on who you ask on how this is going to impact the current war and or its potential escalation, because there are so many different factors to consider. And here on the BuzWeaver channel, we have been keeping up with this in the background, but it wasn't until now that I wanted to bring it back to everyone's attention because of this potential escalation. President Joe Biden has authorized Ukraine to use a powerful American long-range weapon for limited strikes inside Russia in response to North Korea's deployment of thousands of troops to aid Moscow's war effort, according to two senior U.S. officials. So as we learn now, and as we are learning, we have Korean troops there in Ukraine, apparently fighting. Some arrangement that was made between Putin and North Korea. Now, it's hard to say what sort of experience these troops may have, but it is a cause for concern, of course. The easing of restrictions on allowing Kyiv to use the Army tactical missile systems, or ATACMS, to hit targets inside Russia is a significant reversal in U.S. policy and comes as some 10,000 elite North Korean troops have been sent to Kursk, a region of Russia along Ukraine's northern border, to help Moscow forces retake territory gained by Ukraine. Now, it's important to point out here, I'm going to go to a map to kind of show you guys. Obviously, here's Ukraine, and then, of course, the massive Russia. But it's also important to point out here that in Moldova, there's a section of this that is under Russian control, known as Transnistria. And as you can see here, here's Moldova, and this is all Russian-occupied areas. Now, as far as I understand it, they've not really done a lot here because Moldova's right there, and of course, Ukraine is right next to them. And then, of course, a lot of this strategery, as you see here, the Black Sea, is so that they can access the Bosporus Strait. So right down here through Istanbul, Turkey, is the Bosporus Strait right here, and this allows them to go into, essentially leads them into the Mediterranean, and gives them more strategic area for their naval vessels. So this was another critical point also for them to control areas of Crimea. And so as we see here, I just wanted to show you the map real quick. I also wanted to show you Kaliningrad. So not only do they have occupied territory here, the Russians have occupied territory in Moldova. There's a little area here called Kaliningrad, which is also Russian controlled. So it's in between Lithuania and Poland. And we'll get into the higher alerts of some of these other countries like Sweden, Norway, and Finland here in just a moment. But because, of course, they do share a border here with Russia right here, Finland and parts of Sweden. Well, Finland here, and then Sweden and Norway. So we'll get into that here momentarily. But I just want to give you guys kind of an idea on the map, like where Russian territories are, where concerns are. And, of course, Belarus has been helping Russia. So this is another area here, or some people like to call it Belarussia. But, yes. So let's finish up this section here. The Biden administration fears that more North Korean Special Forces units could allow in support of this effort. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that entirely. So until recently, the Biden administration was steadfastly opposed to Ukraine firing ATACMS into Russian territory, obviously, warning that the measure could lead to escalation by the Kremlin that was out of proportion of its battlefield benefits. So in other words, they're kind of poking the bear. And of course, here they give you an idea of ATACMS, pronounced ATACMS, is a supersonic guided missile system that can be fitted with either cluster munitions or conventional warheads with a maximum range of about 190 miles or 300 kilometers. And I'll show you some of that here in a moment too. Ukraine for months has sought permission to use the powerful missiles against Russian territory, arguing that the weapon would enable its strapped forces to strike deep into the country and hit targets that would degrade the Kremlin's war machine. Now, I'm going to say something very controversial here. It is something that I say quite often on Twitter or X, and that is that, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, just my perspective on seeing all this, is that the Democrats seem perfectly content with this war, drip-feeding the Ukrainians at the expense of Ukrainians, maybe not them thinking that it's a particular, they take some kind of joy from the fact that Ukrainians are dying there, but they do take levels of satisfaction that the Ukrainians fighting the Russians are draining the Russians. In other words, they're being a thorn in the side of Putin, their enemy. Just like the absurd and ridiculous lawfare attacks they do against Donald Trump. It's just as a drain. It's just almost like a troll, despicable, almost evil move that they're just doing this, carrot on a stick maneuvering. It's really quite disappointing and sad. And as we said earlier, the long-range missile strike in Russia would mean what it would mean for Ukraine. And of course, Russia could move some of its aircraft and other vehicles out of this particular range because, of course, aircraft can reach areas much easier from range, which is why we have them or why they're made. So, strike authorizations follows months of Kyiv lobbying, which we just talked about. Impact will depend on missile numbers available. U.S. decision may be too late to change course of war. And that's another point. Like I said, there's so many different people that you could ask opinions for, particularly commentators that I follow here on YouTube, whether it's Denis Davidas, the pilot that's there, the Ukrainian pilot, or even Operator Starsky, who's with the Ukrainian forces, who's with the press. And then, of course, on X and all the other creators, they all have their own particular ideas, philosophies, and and what their opinions are on this, what the escalation could potentially be. But of course, right now Russia is on a war footing, so their economy is really based upon what they can generate as far as weaponry and equipment and these sorts of things. So they're on a war footing in Russia. So peace could mean that their economy could completely collapse, and of course, a collapsed economy would then lead to very unhappy people, which could lead to potential situations for Vladimir Putin, of course. And here's a little more on the ATACMS. The advanced missile enables Ukraine to strike deeper into Russian territories, and this is kind of what some representations of those weapons are. And down here you see from Lockheed Martin. HIMARS are probably mainly what they'll be launching them from. That's what the United States has given Ukraine, are these HIMARS, and you can see the different packages they come in. And as we talked about earlier, they range from 140 to 300 kilometers or 196 miles. They can be fitted with warheads, and then, of course, their weight, how long they've been in service since the early 90s. And, this could change the course for them, of course, and it could be different. Of course, this does have now the neighboring countries, as we talked about earlier. The Nordic neighbors released new advice on surviving the war, so they handed out these pamphlets to the Norwegians, to the Danes, to the Finnish, just to let them know what they could do, how they could prepare should things get kind of ugly. And then, of course, that translates here directly into Sweden, and they talk about the heightened state of alert, increased state of alert, the different factors, kind of like we use here. Heightened state of alert, the different DEFCON colors and so forth, the different colors we use for threats and so forth. And so you see Sweden is handing those out. And then, of course, Poland. We saw recently Poland had to scramble fighter jets due to large-scale Russian attack on Ukraine. So as we go back to the map and look at Poland's location right here, very close to Belarus, and then, of course, a lot of the rockets that were being sent in were sent even as far as Kyiv, but all over the country. They were sending them in there. And, of course, there's strays, and then there's, the anti-missiles and anti-drones, excuse me, that can target them and hit them, and the debris can fall into Poland, as we saw earlier last year. Where was it? One of the missiles hit a tractor, farmer's tractor, in a farm area. So all these things all come into play. But Poland, of course, on high alert, as well as Finland, Norway, and Sweden. And then, of course, Alex over here was saying that delusional Zelensky claims Ukraine can win the war against Russia without American help. Well, yeah, that's I'm not entirely sure that can happen unless it was NATO, but then the United States is part of NATO. So I don't see the EU really making a lot of moves because war is costly, and they don't like getting their hands dirty, right? The EU, they like to talk a lot. They're more of paper pushers. They like their conferences and their meetings and their strongly worded letters. The fact that they would actually get involved and get their hands dirty in something is something they would rather the U.S. get involved in. It's really quite annoying. So Russia's small nukes are a big problem for European security. Now, of course, if they do decide to use nuclear weapons, we're determining, we presume that they're going to use low-yield nuclear weapons and not, the big mushroom clouds. Russia has nearly a 10-to-1 advantage over the United States and NATO in non-strategic, i.e. low-yield and short-range nuclear weapons. So you keep poking the bear, and maybe the bear attacks, right? And I don't think it listed any of them here. It doesn't here, but so the flawed push for nuclear weapon capabilities And then here we see some of the weapons that are low yield by the United States. And you can see the various types that we use here. U.S. nuclear weapons with low yield options. And then I'll give you like some size comparisons because, of course, the Russians have their own. And they vary in size. You see, like, here's an individual next to one here. And then to as large as these vehicles that carry them. So these are, possibilities that the Russians could use. See a smaller nuclear missile, ballistic missile with a 196-mile range for this, the 𝐀𝐦𝐚𝐳𝐾T, the 𝐀𝐬𝑧-kt, or as they would say it, the 𝐀𝐬𝑧-kt. And then I agree with Robert Kennedy Jr. here, the anonymous men in lanyards who are currently running the U.S. foreign policy apparently want to start World War III before they leave the White House. So they're poking the bear, right? And they're all obviously taking swats at the wasp nest, maybe to create as much problems for Donald Trump before he takes office as possible. And then speaking of the EU, I found it interesting, chair of NATO military committee takes aim at Elon for allowing too much free speech. So in other words, people who challenge, right, the press or even the governments there. And it's just kind of interesting to see.
So in terms of disinformation and cyber attacks and all the things that are happening, influencing elections, I think it's a serious problem. And I think the use of social media is basically amplifying everything that is being done by bot factories, and I'm very much in favor of freedom of speech, but I'm not necessarily convinced that what Mr. Musk is doing on X is the right approach.
I love how they say that, right? I'm all for freedom of speech, just not hate speech. Oh yeah, that's like the little meme that I like to use sometimes. I'm for free speech, but not for hate speech. And the guy says, well, I'm for physics, just not gravity. You see, they don't even realize what they're saying here is that any sort of censorship, any sort of manipulation or censorship or tamping down of language is censorship. You're impacting free speech. And it's extraordinary that he's saying this because, as you know, just as an aside, Germany's government has collapsed. Could have silver lining for Europe's market. It's funny that if a government collapse in Germany could have a silver lining for the EU. These individuals over there just absolutely amazing to think that even a German collapse right now. I mean, Europe is going through a very difficult time right now. The world is going through a very difficult time right now. So I do welcome your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section. What you think this will lead to. Does this appear to be yet another move by the Biden administration to make things as difficult as possible for Trump? As we see, they try to Trump-proof, trying to pass laws, trying to pass measures, trying to pass policies before Trump gets in office so that he can't reverse certain things and just make things as difficult as possible for Trump. But this looks like a lot of pot stirring by the United States and allowing these long-range missiles. Now, Russia's not stupid. They will move their aircraft and other things further back, obviously, because the aircraft can fly those distances without too much of a problem. So moving them back out of the way. But where they are ensconced in areas, I thought I had a map here somewhere. Let's see. I thought I had a map showing that outline. I guess I don't, but we'll go back to the regular map. But they have like all of this area of Ukraine here and then in Crimea as well. So they will be able to strike those areas quite easily. And as we saw on the map here, where was our map? Right here. You can see, here's Crimea down here. So, and here's occupied Ukraine, I guess, or the Russian occupied Ukraine. Yeah, it's going to be quite fascinating. You guys will have to let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are, your opinions, how much of this is stirring of the pot. But, of course, we have a very big mandate. It was unanimous in the voting as to why we elected Donald Trump, why the United States elected Donald Trump. So your thoughts and opinions are very welcome down in the comments section. Of course, I want to thank all you guys across New Tech for your guys' continued support. Then, of course, below the video, you can find the various social media links that I belong to, as well as my affiliate marketing links. All those help out the channel. So if you do have Prime or order frequently from Amazon, by all means, use that landing page. It does help out the channel. And, of course, your likes and shares all help out the channel. And then, of course, just participating on the channel is greatly appreciated by all of you guys. So appearing there on the screen, that would be the channel icon. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, you guys can click on that to subscribe, as well as to select notifications. That way you know when there's content here on the channel. And I'll see all you guys in the next video.